another debate that's happening over immigration, and that's the topic of H-1B visas. H-1B is our country's largest temporary employment visa program for skilled workers. It allows employers to recruit highly educated foreign professionals for jobs in specific specialty occupations. These are fields that include mathematics, medical science, technology, and engineering. The government sets an annual cap of 85,000 H-1B visas. The program is now under the microscope as Donald Trump prepares to enter office. Many immigration hardliners in his camp have called for the termination of the program, while others like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have supported it. Trump, for his part, called the program great and has made no indication that he plans to eliminate it, although he has criticized similar programs in the past. Joining me for more is Zeke Hernandez. He's an associate professor at the Wharton School and an author of the book, The Truth About Immigration, Why Successful Societies Welcome Newcomers, and Stuart Stevens, senior advisor at the Lincoln Project and author of the book, The Conspiracy to End America, 5 Ways My Old Party is Driving Our Democracy to Autocracy. Zeke, I had a great conversation with you earlier this week, and Stuart, on the way to that conversation, I heard a great conversation that you had with Nicole about this. So I wanted to get you all in the same room so we can talk about it. Now, Zeke, the H-1B program, like every government policy, is imperfect. You have argued, though, that it is remarkably helpful to American growth. It's got its critics, and one of the criticisms is that it suppresses wages. Talk to me about the H-1B program a little bit.
Look, the bottom line is that the H-1B program is one of the main avenues by which we get access to the world's best and brightest. And these are people who bring at least 5 crucial economic benefits. They bring innovation, they bring investment, they bring talent, they bring consumption, and they also pay taxes. I don't know of anybody who doesn't want those benefits. And so talking about ending or limiting this program is talking about ending or limiting those 5 things. We have very compelling evidence that H-1B workers actually create jobs for American workers. That is, for every H-1B worker that they hire, companies hire more than one additional person for a job. We have evidence that these people on these visas disproportionately contribute to patents. For example, immigrants are only 16% of inventors, but they are responsible for 36% of all patents in the U.S., and many of those immigrants come into the country on H-1B visas, and these immigrants start many of the technology companies that create products and services that make our lives better. That's really what's at stake in this debate.
Stuart, Donald Trump, for now, is coming down in support of Musk, in support of H-1B visas. But back in 2016, in a statement that is now scrubbed from his campaign site, Trump said in part, quote, "I will end forever the use of H-1B as a cheap labor program and institute an absolute requirement to hire American workers first for every visa and immigration program." End quote. Which leads me to wonder whether Trump will stick to this or not. But you had an interesting theory with Nicole the other day, in which you mentioned that if all the people on H-1Bs came from Norway, Trump would have and Bannon would have no problem with this.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. You know, Donald Trump's not going to take a position that will limit, like, Scandinavian models coming to the United States. You know, this is sort of a nutty argument. The problem with the H-1B visa is that it's too limited. We only do 85,000 a year. We should double or triple that. The founder of Zoom is H-1B visa. The guy who runs Google and another person who co-founded Google, H-1B visa. The person running Microsoft is H-1B visa. As far as what's good for American workers, yeah, if take the coal industry. The solution to clean coal is not likely to be found by a coal worker, a coal miner. It's going to be founded by someone who has high-tech skills. This is just a win-win. We ought to do more of these, and we ought to expand that so that if you get a graduate degree in the United States, with your diploma, you should have a green card stapled to it. This would increase the economy. This would be good for everybody.
This is an important point you make, Zeke, that I want to underscore here. The H-1B visa, some of the criticism of it, it may be legitimate, is that it's limiting for a worker because the visa holder gets sponsored by their employer, and that means that they're kind of stuck in that job. It's hard for someone on H-1B visa to go to a competitive job from another company, whether it's a hospital or a tech company. That's why Stewart's making the point that they should staple a green card to it so that you have the right of mobility. So we attract more H-1B visa holders because they think they can get better jobs in America.
Yeah, that's right. These are employer-sponsored visas. And so the employer has a lot of control, and it's very hard for workers on H-1B visas to move to other jobs or even to quit their jobs and start a company. In fact, there's research that shows that the moment someone on an H-1B is able to get citizenship or be on a different kind of visa, they are much more likely to start companies like the ones that Stuart mentioned, whether it's Zoom or Pfizer or Moderna or all these companies that make our jobs better, that make our lives better, and create a lot of jobs. And so the program certainly can be improved in its design, not only the fact that we don't have enough of them, but to fully allow these immigrants to make their contributions that make us all better off. But I think that at a minimum, we don't want to reduce the number or eliminate the program. We want to expand it and make it more flexible for sure.
Stuart, obviously, these are, I was talking about U.S. Steel earlier, strange bedfellows sometimes. You never know who's on what side. This is another one. Senator Bernie Sanders weighed in on the issue this week. He accused companies of using the H-1B program to bring in, quote, low-wage indentured servants. Now, part of the criticism is this, that you can't move around with an H-1 visa, but he's criticizing it from a labor perspective. Fair criticism, not the same reason that a whole bunch of people on the right are critical of the program, but it is part of our immigration issue in this country that we've got a lot of different views and some imperfect systems, and we have to have a comprehensive look at how to improve immigration in our country.
Yeah, I think it really goes to what is your concept of how the economy grows and what is your concept of what it means to be an American. We're talking about birthright citizenship. So Donald Trump's mom is Scottish. So Elon Musk kids, they're not going to be United States citizens because they're birthright citizenship examples. If you believe that the United States is not a limited pie, that it can grow, which every bit of evidence would indicate. I mean, look at where the stock market is. Look at where employment is now. Anything that will increase that is good. When we need to start really worrying about America is when people stop trying to come to America to get better jobs. North Korea doesn't have an immigration problem. We should think about that.
Yeah, America is still the chief destination that people want to come to, and we should work hard, Zeke, to keep that. It is interesting because, in fact, the point Stuart makes goes even further. If we have seen numerous studies, including those done by the government, that if we restrict immigration, legal immigration to this country, the economy stands a chance of shrinking, not growing over the next 10 years.
Yeah, in fact, we don't need to speculate about that. We know because we've tried it before. We tried it in 1924. We tried it during the Great Depression by deporting half of all the Mexican Americans in this country under the pretext that we would create American jobs. We've done it during the Obama administration with the Secure Communities program. All the evidence we have on all of those historical attempts to limit immigration or even reduce it have created less jobs for Americans, have reduced innovation, have reduced entrepreneurship. In other words, they've made us worse off, right? It's the most un-American thing that we could possibly do. One thing to add on this, too, is that I think this idea of limiting immigration or making it harder for people to get citizenship comes from this thinking that, well, we have to really make sure, we have to try very hard to make sure people assimilate, otherwise they won't really commit to our national enterprise. And the evidence is quite the opposite. Citizenship is not like a hurdle that people should overcome. Citizenship is a very powerful incentive for people to contribute to our national enterprise. There's been studies that show that when you make it harder for people to get citizenship, they contribute less because they don't feel like they belong. So citizenship, after people pass, of course, some basic requirements, should be something that is not that hard to get because it will allow people to make more contributions than otherwise.
I want to understand a little bit about what the backlash to this feels like, because with the budget or with the continuing resolution, there were 38 people who decided to snub Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and then there were 10. Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, who's going to be in the White House. These are all guys who want to eliminate H-1Bs. They're up against a different crowd. How's that all going to play out?
Well, it's just sort of fascinating, this fight between Musk and Bannon. I think you have to look at what their power center is. Steve Bannon has no power at all without Donald Trump's approval. That's not true of Elon Musk. I mean, right now, Elon Musk is sort of in this I'm really president mode. But if Donald Trump and Elon Musk broke up, which is going to happen, Elon Musk is not going to disappear. he still is going to be the wealthiest person in the world. He may have some difficulties that they're going to throw up with the great tax benefits that and beneficiaries of the United States government that he gets with contracts, but he's still going to be like an important, wealthy guy that has big companies. That's not true of Steve Bannon. So, look, are you driven by fear, which Miller and Bannon are? And these are two clearly damaged individuals who are sort of using public policy to work out personal issues. Or do you believe that we have an optimistic vision of America? I go back to Ronald Reagan's last speech. Say what you will about Ronald Reagan. It was an ode to what it meant to be an American, how anybody could come here to be an American. And if we lose that ethos, we really have lost, I think, a lot of what it means to be an American.
Well said, gentlemen. Thank you for your contributions today. Zeke Hernandez is a professor at the Wharton School and the author of The Truth About Immigration. Stuart Stevens is a senior advisor at the Lincoln Project and author of The Conspiracy to End America.